I pulled into my vacant lot after months away and immediately knew something was wrong. The gate was wide open. The heavy padlock I installed before leaving was lying on the ground, cleanly cut in half, and parked across my property were 6 cars I had never seen before. Before I could even process what I was looking at, a man stormed over from the neighboring houses and shouted, "What are you doing on my property?" I honestly thought he was joking. Then he told me he bought this lot from the HOA for parking. There was just one problem. I'm not even part of their HOA. Hey everyone, welcome back. Imagine serving your country overseas or being gone for months handling life, only to come home and find strangers using your land like it's a public parking lot. And when you confront them, they claim they legally bought it from an HOA you don't even belong to. This story has fake paperwork, police visits, lawsuits, and a corruption twist that gets unbelievable. And trust me, it gets so much worse. So here's the backstory. I inherited this vacant lot from my grandfather years ago. He bought it decades before the surrounding neighborhood was even built. When developers eventually constructed the subdivision next door, they formed an HOA. But my property was never included. It's a completely separate parcel. Different deed, different tax ID, different everything. I've always paid the property taxes on time. They're on auto pay. I had the land surveyed years ago, and the boundary markers are crystal clear. Because people occasionally tried to dump trash there. I installed a proper fence and a heavy-duty gate with a solid padlock. Before leaving for deployment, I even hired a property management company to check on it monthly and send photos. For the first few months, they did. Everything looked fine. Then the update stopped. I was busy overseas and didn't think much of it at the time. Apparently, I should have. Standing there staring at those 6 cars, I walked the property. Tire tracks had torn up the grass. Part of my fence had been driven over. I could already see oil stains on the dirt. The neighbor who had yelled at me marched closer, holding a folded document. He shoved it toward me and said, "I paid $15,000 for this lot. The HOA sold it to me. I have the paperwork." The document had an HOA letterhead and signatures. It looked official. I told him flatly, "This is my property. The HOA doesn't own it. They can't sell it." He accused me of trying to scam him. Said he'd been parking here for months with full permission. Said if I had a problem, I could take it up with the HOA. So I called the non-emergency police line. When the officer arrived, I showed him my deed, my survey, and the county property records on my phone. The neighbor showed his HOA sale paperwork. The officer looked back and forth between us and sighed. "Civil matter," he said. He told the neighbor it might be wise to stop using the lot until it was sorted out legally. The neighbor refused. Said he wasn't moving a single car unless a judge told him to. And that's when I realized the real problem wasn't him. It was the HOA. I went straight to the HOA president's house. He answered the door already looking irritated, like he knew why I was there. I showed him my deed and asked him how they thought they had authority to sell land they didn't own. He calmly explained that my lot had appeared abandoned and was negatively impacting property values. He claimed the board had voted to assume control of unmaintained adjacent property for the benefit of the community. I stared at him. "I'm not a member of your HOA," I said. "You have zero authority over my property." He insisted notices had been posted about the meeting. Posted where? Inside their neighborhood, where I don't live. The smugness in his tone told me he thought they'd gotten away with something clever. That was the moment I decided to stop arguing and start lawyering up. The next morning, I met with a real estate attorney. He listened quietly while flipping through my documents. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "This is one of the more outrageous things I've seen in 20 years. We immediately filed a quiet title action to eliminate any claim." He sent cease and desist letters to both the HOA and the neighbor. And on his advice, I posted 72-hour tow notices on all 6 vehicles. The neighbor started driving past my property multiple times a day. One morning he yelled that I'd regret this. I documented everything. 72 hours later, the tow trucks arrived. When the neighbor saw his cars being loaded up, he absolutely lost it. Screaming, threatening lawsuits, calling me every name imaginable. I didn't say a word. I just recorded. He called the police again. A different officer arrived, pulled up the official county records, and confirmed right there that I was the legal owner. He told the neighbor that without a court order, he had no right to park there. The cars left on tow trucks. That afternoon, the HOA president called me. His tone had changed completely. He said there may have been a misunderstanding and that they wanted to resolve this privately. I told him to have his lawyer call mine. And then discovery began. The HOA dragged their feet handing over documents. My attorney filed a motion to compel. When we finally got the meeting minutes, everything fell apart. The vote to assume control of my property had been held without the required quorum. Only 5 board members were present when 7 were required. One member had voted against it and explicitly warned them they had no legal authority. His objection was recorded, ignored. But here's where it got worse. The buyer, the neighbor who paid $15,000, was the HOA president's brother-in-law. Text messages between them showed they planned to flip the land later and split the profits. The president had targeted my lot for months, calling it an eyesore and an easy opportunity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was planned fraud. 3 board members resigned immediately once they saw the evidence. The district attorney eventually filed criminal charges against the HOA president for fraud and theft by deception. On the civil side, the HOA's insurance company initially refused coverage, arguing fraud wasn't protected. But facing overwhelming evidence and massive liability, the HOA voted to settle. The settlement covered all of my legal fees, which had climbed to $55,000, plus $25,000 for property damage and loss of use, and $75,000 in punitive damages. They were also required to publicly acknowledge they had zero authority over my property and would never attempt to assert control again. The total settlement exceeded $155,000. The quiet title action finalized cleanly. 14 months later, the HOA president accepted a plea deal. He received fines, restitution orders, probation, and 18 months in a minimum security facility. The brother-in-law tried suing the HOA to recover his $15,000. From what I heard, he recovered only part of it. He also paid all the impound fees for his 6 cars. Every homeowner in that HOA ended up paying a special assessment to cover the financial damage. As for me, I installed a reinforced fence, added security cameras, and hired a new property management company. My title is clear. My land is secure. The craziest part: if the president had simply approached me and asked to buy the lot legitimately, I probably would have considered it. Instead, he destroyed his career and reputation over greed. So tell me, if you came home to strangers parking on your property claiming an HOA sold it to them, what would you have done? Would you have settled early or taken it all the way to court? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories where corruption backfires spectacularly, you're going to want to hear the next one.